another realization that perhaps I didn't want to be a banker. So I was starting to run out of things to do. And so I did what everyone does when they don't know what they want to do, and went and became a management consultant. And I've been at Nous now for about 18 months and enjoying it so far. That's a little bit about me. I'll throw over to Jules now.
Yeah, thanks, Eamon. My journey to get to Nous is probably a bit less structured than what Eamon went through. So I'm a senior consultant now here at Nous. I've been here for 4 years, but going way back to when I was at uni, I did business and law because that was a combination that I thought would open up as many doors as possible for me, given I had no idea what I wanted to do. I got towards the end of my degree and all my friends were doing clerkships and all different sorts of things at law firms, and I thought, well, first of all, I don't want to be a lawyer, so what am I going to do? And why are you guys all doing this? I just want to keep having fun and partying. I want to put off life for as long as possible. Anyway, I realized that wasn't much of a plan, so sort of fell into volunteering at a community legal service up here in Brisbane. I'm in Brisbane, and from there, through a family friend, ended up getting a job at the Director of Public Prosecutions up here doing criminal law. Certainly not what I had imagined or planned to be doing, but I thought if I didn't get stuck into law after having finished my degree, I'd never do it. Did it for a couple of years, quite enjoyed it, but realised it wasn't what I wanted to do long term. And so I'd always thought about working in public policy, working for government. I had a friend working in the Queensland government, and his team was looking for someone. So I jumped across from the DPP into the Queensland government as a policy officer. Stayed there for a couple of years. Ended up in Canberra via a bit of a career break in Canada. Worked in Canberra for about 4 years at the Department of Finance and the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet. Absolutely loved being down there. Was there for probably the most tumultuous years in Canberra, although there's been a lot of tumultuous years down in Canberra. But there were more prime ministers than years I was there. Let's just say that. So went through quite a few, and then was coming back to Brisbane and was thinking about what it is I wanted to do. Knew I wanted to do something different, use it sort of that opportunity when I was moving home back to Brisbane as an opportunity to do a bit of a career change, and a bit like Eamon, when you don't know what to do, you become a management consultant, and that's how I ended up where I am today.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Julian and Eamon. I think that's a really good place to jump into our first question for actually the whole group rather than just both of you. I think you've both had really interesting careers and tried out a few different things along the way, which is really important. But I know that one question that I often personally have when I might be out or at a dinner party and meet someone who says they're a consultant, the first question that comes to my head is, but what do you actually do? So what is a consultant? If someone is a management consultant, what is it that they do every day? And so rather than just throwing that question to both of you, because I'm sure you have answers, what I'd love to do is to throw it to this whole group, so everyone participating in the workshop today. I'm going to split you off into breakout rooms just for about 90 seconds and give you a chance to talk together in a small group of around 4 people, and then come back to the session with your own definition of what it is that breakout rooms what it is that a consultant actually is. So you should get a invite to your breakout room in about 5 seconds.
Oh, should Jules and I join them as well?
Yeah, you jump in there. Yeah. Welcome back.
So essentially, like we discussed this, it's companies or like governments hire consultants to increase the productivity of the running of their business or government in a certain area. And usually when the timeframes are like sort of minimized, or they've got shorter timeframes, they often get specialists in to upscale and to increase the productivity and get the desired result, essentially.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Alan. And so they're people who come in and work with an organisation to increase that organisation's productivity. Is that it in a nutshell?
Essentially, yeah. Well, that's my perception of it. That's what I believe it is.
Yeah, cool. Great. What about other groups? What did you have? What did you discuss?
My group had some excellent answers, so they should definitely be putting their hands up to share.
Yeah, as did mine.
So I was in Julian's group, and we were just chatting about how consulting, what our understanding of it is, that you're helping someone achieve their goals, or you're helping plan and advise people. Yeah, it's pretty much what we had.
Yeah, brilliant. I like that idea of helping someone or helping an organisation achieve their goals. Thanks, Azrin. That's great. What about someone from Eamon's group, now that he's dubbed you in?
Yeah, I was in Eamon's group. We had basically someone that was sort of an expert in a certain field that could help out a company or an organisation with a specific task or something that they may be not experts in themselves, such as like a new internal structure or something like that, so that you can get the consultants to sort of advise them or do some of the work for them that they specialise in.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Josh. And I'm sure Julian and Eamon loved being called an expert in their field.
I was just going to say, good to know we're experts, or at least seen to be experts.
Yes, seen to be is probably the key.
Yeah.
And what about anyone else? Did anyone else have anything slightly different or any other ideas?
I think our group talked about just the consultants having a wider perspective of what's going on and a fresh perspective. So being able to, whether or not they're sort of on top of the specific subject matter, they'll just have a sort of an idea of how to guide people in the right direction.
Yeah.
You're too close to it yourself.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Talia. I really love that. I love that idea of the different perspective or an external perspective. I think that's really important. Okay, and I think Anisha in the chat has had a really good contribution in the fact, the idea of expert experience and offering advice, that idea of perspectives, bringing in an external perspective. And I also really love that you are multitasking, Anisha, and babysitting your great baby brother. That is very impressive. And I'd say a good skill of a consultant is someone who can multitask. So
very COVID too. Very COVID applicable.
Okay, so we will go to the experts now, Julian and Eamon. What are we on the right track? Does that sound like along the lines of what you do every day?
Yeah, I reckon. I said to my group that I was really keen to hear their answers and for everyone here who's contributed so far to take them away, because one of the things I dread is in a social circumstance or meeting someone for the first time and they say, "Oh, so what do you do?" And you say, "Oh, I'm a management consultant," and their eyes glaze over. Even worse, they sort of just like back away confused and run away from you. And it's not an easy thing to explain quickly. So to hear all those perspectives, I think is really useful. And I think they're all pretty much bang on. And I was been thinking about this question a little bit over the last couple of days, and I think the way I often try and explain it is that we work with others to help solve their problems, basically, and problems that they can't solve themselves or don't want to solve themselves. So that second one sounds a little bit funny, but oftentimes you'll need an independent set of eyes or independent expertise or whatever it might be to come in and help solve a certain problem or approach a certain challenge. I just wanted to, before I throw it to Eamon to get his perspectives, wanted to pick up on that idea of an expert. Maybe we are experts in some ways, but I reckon maybe experts in being a jack of all trades. So particularly me, I like to think that I know a lot know a little about a lot of subjects, but not a lot about very much, in the best possible way. So, and that is really one of the skills you need to do to be a consultant, because you don't really have a lot of control over what sort of work you're going to be working on. The nature of the business we're in, professional services, we'll take on whatever challenge that people need help with, and that can mean often that we need to get across really complex and nuanced issues really quickly, and then be able to bring sort of a general set of principles or general set of ideas to a problem to try and help solve it in a way that hasn't been done before, I suppose.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Julian. And a good question from Talia here for both of you. Do either of you specialise in a certain subject matter or area in your consulting work?
So that's a good question that lets us talk about this concept that we have in management consulting called like the consulting T. So if you imagine like a capital letter T, the top is talking about the breadth of your knowledge, and that is kind of what Julian's been talking about so far, where we know a little about a lot of things. Because one week I'll be working on the org structure, then next week I'll be doing some stuff with organizational values, and then next I'll be doing financial modeling. It's all doing a little bit of everything. But as you kind of get more senior, you do develop the rest of like the depth, which is that long part of the T, and you might have a particular thing that you do. So you could be an expert in org structure, for example. There are lots of consultants who do that. Or you could be an expert in an area, like you might be a higher education expert and you consult a lot with universities. For me, I don't have an area, I would say, yet where I'm an expert, where people, in the industry know of me personally and would come to me for that. But there are areas I like.
It won't be long, Eamon. It won't be long.
Maybe. But there are definitely areas I like working. So I love working on organizational culture. The fluffy stuff, I like to call it. So it's, how do people feel about their workplace? Do they enjoy it? What is the values of the place? What's the culture like? I quite like doing those types of projects. What about you, Jules?
Yeah, and I think just to add to what Eamon was saying, I think Eamon and I are the worker bees of the organisation, right? So we need to do a lot of different things all the time, which is just get thrown on things at short notice. The more senior people in the organisation, the leaders of the organisation, are often experts in one or two things, and have either built that out in the industry. So if it's a health expert, someone who's worked in the health system in one way or another for a long time, and then come across into consulting to offer that expertise, or have built it up through just through a consulting career or other careers as well. For me, so I have obviously a background in public policy, did a little bit of law, but then did quite a bit of time in public policy working for both the Queensland and the Commonwealth governments. And then particularly before I joined Nous, I was working on health policy in Canberra. And so when I came here, I thought I'll work a lot on public policy and probably try and bring some of the health expertise that I've got. But that's just not how consulting works, particularly at our level for the worker bees. You just get thrown on everything. And to be honest, that's been fantastic. Like, I've loved that. So the projects I have enjoyed the most have actually probably been more what we call strategy projects, and I particularly like when strategy and public policy intersects. So my favourite project I think I ever worked on was with the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority up in Townsville. So they're a government agency, so a public sector agency who's responsible for looking after the Great Barrier Reef and regulating use of the Great Barrier Reef. And of course the reef is dying on their watch, but not due to anything they're responsible for. So it's due to climate change and due to some other sort of complicated factors, but nothing that they really have responsibility for, nothing they can do about it. And so that was a really interesting strategy challenge for organisation. How do we approach this issue that we have no control over, that's killing the thing that we're responsible for and people are going to blame us for? And so I just, to me, I've done a few other projects like that that have been the intersection between strategy and public policy, and I just find that kind of thing fascinating. So yeah, as Eamon said, definitely things that we're interested in, but probably not things that we're seen as experts in yet by the market.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure, just as a general aside, a lot of us would love to see more often the intersection of strategy and public policy, and those two colliding. I know both of you are obviously at Nous, and Nous is a partner of CareerTrackers. And I also know that, or understand that Nous has a particular brand or expertise when it comes to management consulting, but there are lots of different organisations who do management consulting. What is it specifically about Nous, and what is the Nous brand? And then also, what are some of the other organisations, and how might the students find more out about the culture or the focus of other management consulting firms?
Yeah, and that's actually, this is probably a good chance to kind of contextualize both Nous and when we talk about management consulting. So management consulting and consulting are not synonyms. So consulting is probably a broad umbrella term that talks about, hiring people who are experts to give advice. So there's engineering consultants, there's IT consultants, there's HR consultants, there's consultants for everything. And management consulting is just one subset of that. And so in looking at where you might want to work when you graduate, it's worthwhile thinking about if, for example, if you studied engineering, if you want to go down an engineering specific route in consulting, or if you want to go down something a little bit more general, which would probably be management consulting, which is that we know a little bit about a lot of things. And then I guess within that kind of management consulting space, I think, and Jules, you might sort of see it a little bit differently, but I think the big differentiator between Nous and sort of some of the other major players is there's probably more of an emphasis on, I guess, positive influence is like the words that we would use at Nous. So that is looking at what the impact of our project will be on those closest to it and society more broadly, and looking at whether or not that's something that we want to bring into the world. So I know we've made decisions as an organization where we're not going to work with gambling companies, to help them figure out how they can get more people gambling, or we're not going to work with tobacco companies to figure out how they can get more people smoking, and those types of things. I think that might be that, and a big emphasis on a kind of positive, happy, relaxed workplace culture. It's probably a bit less stuffy than some of the other management consulting firms. Jules?
Yeah, I think that's right. So I think you hit on the main things there, Eamon, and the big one is, and sort of we do all live and breathe this idea of positive influence, to the point that we often get called a bit of a cult. But all the best organizational cultures are cult-like. So we like to think that we've got all the good parts of a cult and none of the bad parts, hopefully. But that is the case, and that's one of the things that really appealed to me when I was thinking about joining the House and thinking about what I was going to do next after leaving the public service. Obviously, having worked in public policy, I wanted to be doing work that I sort of was contributing positively to society, and certainly not taking back and not doing any harm. The idea that Nous does assess every project that it might work on through that lens of, is this having a positive contribution to the society that we live in, I think is really important. It's also really easy to say that and much harder to follow through on that. But it's not perfect, but I think to the best that's possible for commercial organisation, we do that. I think we do less than some of the other consulting firms might do with just working with companies just to maximise their profit. I think we'd be less likely to do some of that work than others would be. And certainly, as Eamon said, some of those examples, like, the easy ones, like gambling, weapons, things like that, we would never work there. But I think what else sets us apart from other organisations is that some of the things that could be considered grey areas, like climate change or banking or things like that, we often have quite open debates within the organisation, sometimes with the entire organisation, about what our position should be on those sorts of projects. We don't always, not everyone's always happy with that lens, but we always individually have a right to say we don't want to work on a certain type of project, but at least we can all understand why as an organisation we have landed where we have. And I think that kind of thing really does set us apart. Like, we do really have a strong internal culture and strong internal narrative about, what we think is right and wrong, what are the different things we should be working on.
Yeah, great. And another good question from Josh here. Do either of you ever get given tasks or jobs where you don't know where to start or how to do the task?
I saw that, and I was thinking every single project ever started.
I was thinking, I'm trying to think back to a project where I've known what to do from the start. And
I reckon, sorry, you go, Eamon.
I think the kind of cheeky answer is almost exclusively I get given tasks or jobs where I don't know where to start or how to do the task, which I think is kind of, especially if you were to start as a grad, as a management consultant, that would be your job. You would just get given stuff and you'd have no idea how to do it. But the skill that you learn and that you get taught from other consultants is how to break down that task into very small, achievable tasks. that are really simple and easy to do. And the challenge isn't doing each of those small individual tasks, it's figuring out how you can break down a big meaty problem into achievable things that you're going to do, and how to do that efficiently and effectively.
Yeah.
And I think just to add to that too, the other thing that we, so absolutely, more often than not, if not always, you're starting something thinking, I have no idea what this topic is, or who this client is, or I've never worked on this kind of problem before. And the great thing about consulting, and particularly working for a large firm like we are, we're an international, Nous is an international firm, offices across the country, in London and Toronto now as well. We're 300 strong or something, Eamon.
I think 400.
Maybe more than that. Yeah. The great thing about that is that because we have all those resources, we have what we call frameworks that have been developed over time about how to approach problems. We have heaps of them, but you find that there are a handful or a dozen that are often applicable in many situations. And so if you don't know anything about the topic or about the client or about the sector or the problem or whatever it is, more often than not, you can really quickly find someone who's worked on that before, or at least a framework that's been used in that way before. And the framework is really just a way of thinking about something. Yeah. I'm sure you've all come across frameworks in your studies. You might not refer to them as frameworks, but it's just a way of thinking, a way of approaching a problem. And I think that's something that makes consulting an incredibly useful profession, particularly I think coming out of uni. I often think I wish I had done consulting straight out of uni, because it just teaches you how to think about things in such a useful way. It really is applicable in your everyday life, let alone to whatever career you might have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was thinking back at when we were planning for this session about the idea of consulting also being you just need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, or comfortable with the fact that you're never going to be that expert or an expert in everything. And so maybe if you want to draw that out a little bit, I think Eamon, you were the one who brought that up initially.
Yeah, I guess. So basically, I mean, we all kind of get that dread when someone asks you to do something, and usually they ask you to do it with, and the way they ask, it's almost like assumed that you know how, and there's that feeling that you get where you're like, crap, I have no idea what I'm going to do. That feeling is something you have to kind of get really used to and get really comfortable with. And basically we talked about, I guess when we were planning for this idea is that people hire consultants for expertise. But like if I was working on a project with a banker, for example, it was a finance project and we were working with a bank to do certain things, the bank is going to be the expert on banking. Mm-hmm. So we're going to go into that room and the client's going to know more about banking than I will. Mm-hmm. And they might ask me a question about banking and they're going to know more about that than I will. But what you would need to get really good at, and what we as consultants, I think, do get reasonably good at, is just structured thinking. Mm-hmm. And so it's not actually content knowledge. And so you get asked and you have to learn a lot about very specific things that clients are experts in, because it's their day-to-day business, it's their bread and butter. But our day-to-day business is structured thinking, and kind of logically looking at a problem and going through a certain set of steps to kind of get to a defensible conclusion. And so, yeah, there's this, if you go into a meeting with a client, you won't be the smartest person in the room, and you're just kind of getting comfortable being dumb and then asking dumb questions in a smart way.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone would ever call you dumb, Eamon, but I absolutely understand that concept. Really great questions coming through on the chat, guys. So I'm just going to keep going to those and then we'll get back to the agenda as we go, if that's okay. I'd also just say, also feel comfortable taking yourselves off mute if you want to ask the questions yourself, so I don't botch it as I'm reading out. But a great question from Bronwyn, which I'm sure has happened to both of you, in a situation where a client has come to you with a problem and you've given them specific advice, you've done the work, but then they haven't taken on board what your advice or what the recommendations are, and how you've dealt with that. Have either of you experienced that before?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it kind of goes a little bit to what Eamon just spoke about as well. So I think there's sort of two parts to that question. The first one is about knowing that the advice that you're recommending isn't going to be taken on board. And that's really difficult, and it is a real challenge, and it can be a real frustrating part of consulting, is that sort of you are removed from the implementation, if that makes sense. You're never going to be doing the doing, and that's part of why you're hired. That's part of the benefit you can bring, as I was just saying. You're sort of from the outside looking in. But increasingly, I think, for consulting as a profession, and certainly this is something we've spoken about a lot at Nous, is that we're all about, our business is nothing if we're not maximizing the value we're providing to our clients. And the value for clients needs to come from something they can actually do. So if we're recommending things they can't do for whatever reason, then obviously we're not doing the best job that we can. So getting into that implementation and getting into how might this be followed through in practice, what are the barriers, why haven't these things been done, is something that we increasingly need to focus on, I think. And it's probably always an ongoing challenge for us, I reckon, because it's easy to go a bit too far the other way. Eamon was saying maybe a bit too much up high and a bit too much from the outside. So it can be frustrating, but I think it's also kind of an exciting part of the challenge too, is how can we make sure that the advice we're giving can be followed through? How can we help with that implementation? How can we help to make sure that things are done? And the second part of it just goes to what Eamon was saying before about despite the problem or even the solution being identified by the organisation in the first place, they know what's going on. And so many times, we'll go into a project and they'll have a problem that they've identified and they don't know the solution to. But you start talking to people in the organisation, start working things through, and people in the organisation have had this idea, or some bits of the idea, and you pull parts out because they're the experts in the content that they're working on. And it's the old joke or adage about consultants is that they'll charge you to take your watch and tell you the time and then give you your watch back. And so we try and avoid that as much as possible. But there is something in that, is that sort of often part of our job is to bring out sort of the expertise that's already in an organisation, or at least the knowledge that's already in the organisation.
Yeah, absolutely. And then a good question from Zoe here, and maybe one for you, Eamon, being someone who's relatively new in being hired to Nous. What are the things that Nous look for in their new consultants as they go through the hiring process?
It could be time for your curveball question, Eamon, that you wanted to throw.
Yeah, it might be. So I guess, okay. Can we ask the question, Hannah?
Please, go for it.
So I love answering a question by asking a question.
Asking a question.
Classic consulting.
Yeah, exactly. Basically, you're all studying at the moment, and I'm sure you're all studying like lots of different things. I guess the challenge we have for the virtual room is for you guys to list a degree that someone could study that would preclude them from becoming a consultant. So something that you could study that means you wouldn't be able to be a management consultant. That's the challenge. So if you've got an idea, are we breaking out or just chucking it in the chat, Hannah?
Yeah, I reckon call it out. Take yourself off mute and call it out, or pop it in the chat if you're not brave enough. My example that I gave was a Bachelor of Fine Arts in printmaking, but Julian and Eamon both assured me that there are definitely fine arts students hanging out.
We love that.
Yeah.
We love that creativity. Bring it on. You need to think about things differently. You need to be able to communicate our solutions in a really engaging way. So, yep, absolutely.
Education, heaps of teachers. One of my the senior consultant in the Canberra office where I work, he was a teacher before he became a consultant, and he works in the education practice now. Almost too many accountants, I think, Jasmine. Accountants and lawyers. Real estate,
sales. We are sales.
Yeah,
what else do we do if not sales?
That's great people skills. They know how to talk to people. Yep.
Exactly. Yep. Business development, bring it in. Yep. Definitely. Yep.
Yeah, Anisha, that's the question.
That's the question we're asking. That's the question we're asking.
Anisha is again showing great consulting skills by asking a question back to both of you. The question there, is there one? Is there one?
Hire that person.
I think, Anisha, you kind of hit it on the point that I hit the nail on the head. I don't know that there is a degree that Nous they would see on your resume and be like, oh no, we don't hire those. So Jules and I both have law degrees, as do quite a lot of management consultants. Too many accountants, too many lawyers. Too many accountants, too many lawyers. But I mean, in the Canberra office of 30 people, we have people with law degrees, people with economics degrees. We have people who studied bachelors of philosophy. We have one person did their PhD in quantum computing. We have someone that studied engineering and did a PhD in like emergency management. We have people that studied music at university. We have an archaeologist that's come across as well, that like they, as soon as they finished uni, like, so it wasn't like they weren't and worked somewhere else for a while. They studied archaeology and then joined Nous straight away. What's the interesting one in Brisbane? Something about cows?
Yeah, someone did. One of my colleagues did a PhD on a certain type of cattle. I can't remember exactly. Something to do with rearing a certain type of cattle. I've got a professional musician up here as well. One of our former colleagues was a vet. It just, you name it, we've got it. And I think that, you know, that kind of diversity is really important. And I think, I don't know, I reckon it's part of it, one of the strengths of Nous too, that we really do hire for that diversity of thinking. And if you think about it, we, you know, as we were saying before, our job is helping to solve problems that other people can't solve themselves for whatever reason. So by definition, most of the time they are really complex, challenging, wicked problems. And they haven't been solved before because normal ways of thinking haven't worked. So bringing in a diversity of thinking, which comes from people from having a wide range of experiences, both through life and education, thinking about things in different ways, how you can, you know, crack some of those tough nuts. Having said all that, I think that, you know, the skills that you do need, other than being comfortable in the uncomfortable, like we were saying before, is being able to, you know, quickly get across a range of complex issues, be able to juggle a lot of things at one time, and really embrace learning. You know, really have a real thirst for knowledge and want to be able to take on things and learn new things, meet new people, all that kind of things. Those are all really general skills, but I think you do need those things to be successful.
Yeah, and some of them are like almost a mindset over a skill. Like totally. You get better at being being comfortable not knowing things, but it is I would argue as much a mindset as a skill. Yeah, and I think like Julian's right. Like if an accounting firm hires us to solve a strategy problem, they're hiring us. Like they are accountants. They don't need more people who think like accountants. They need people who think differently to accountants. So I've just latched onto that one as an example, but like I'm doing a project with defense and they are defense logisticians. They do logistics. They don't need people who do defense logistics to come in and tell them how the organization should be structured, because it's a different type of thinking. So I don't think there is a single degree, but it is skills that you would want to be able, like it is skills, and that is kind of structured thinking. They talk about being able to use logic, which I find sometimes is a little bit like condescending, but really it's just kind of like being able to break down a problem into smaller, bite-sized problems.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think on that point, Eamon, around different perspectives sort of brings us to our next conversation. Speaking here with us is obviously a group of brilliant up-and-coming Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students. And so thinking about the question of why does consulting and why does management consulting need more Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the profession, what's your thoughts when we pose that kind of question?
I thought this question would come, and I've been thinking a bit about it. And I guess there's kind of two reasons. Mm-hmm. And I guess the first part is, and this is sort of a harsh reality, regardless of whether or not you go into consulting, that as young Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander professionals, whatever role you go into, there's going to be extra work that you have to do. So, you will be asked to be on the RAP committee for the organisation that you're in. There's all that type of extra work. There's an added expectation of anything Indigenous that your organisation is doing, you will be a part of. And that's not necessarily a problem, but that's a part of it. And I guess so one reason, almost sort of selfishly, is that if only one Indigenous person works in an organisation, then they have to do everything, and that's a lot of extra work. But the more Indigenous people that are working in organisations, the easier that becomes. And there's also more diversity of thought, because not all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people think the same as well. So that's kind of like the first one, which is, I guess, something to look forward to when you start working. And then the second is that, particularly in the consulting that we do at Nous, we often work on projects where what happens, the outcomes of that are going to drastically impact the lives of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And so it is really important that there is someone that can understand that perspective a little bit more. I think, Jules, you would have heaps of examples yourself. I've got, I'm doing a project at the moment where it's like an employment program in Central Australia for remote Aboriginal communities there. If I wasn't on the project, nobody from Nous, nobody from the Department of Social Services, nobody from the organisation that's running the program in Central Australia would have been Indigenous. And I think when you have decisions that are being made that are going to impact Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, it's really important that there is someone there representing those voices. And I think that's sort of the main one. And I guess that flows on to the first point that I made, which is that if there's only one Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander person, they're the one that's going to be expected to be that voice, which you might not feel it. You might, thinking about it, you might not think that that's much, but it can be quite draining. And it can mean that if you have other career aspirations, that it means that you cannot be pigeonholed into only doing that because you don't have time to do anything else. And so you kind of just end up working on the Indigenous projects. So that's sort of the two that I would say, and hopefully that's not too depressing.
No, I think that's really important insight, Eamon, and thanks for sharing. What about you, Julian? What's your reflection on that kind of question?
Yeah, I think it's just adding on a bit to what Eamon said. I mean, looping back in as well to what we talked about previously, that often as consultants we're brought in to help solve really complex challenges that haven't been addressed before, and one of those challenges that comes up in all sorts of ways is unfortunately the inequalities faced by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians across the country. And there is no shortage of non-Indigenous people like me working on these sorts of projects. We need more Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people working on those projects and contributing to solving some of those problems and helping the communities, address some of those inequalities. It won't work in any other way. It hasn't worked so far with non-Indigenous people trying to solve those problems, and it won't work if we continue to do it that way. I've worked on a number of projects that have involved Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as clients or affected the communities in one way or another, without having that diversity of perspectives, or at least the perspectives of what it's like to be an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander in this country, or living in a community, or interacting with the education system, or whatever it might be, it's much more difficult to come up with a solution that's going to work. Because you can't put yourself in those shoes if you haven't lived it. So, look, I think it's critically important that we have more Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people represented across the board in every sector. They should, that should at least match the representation of the community. But particularly in consulting, where we're working on some of these really challenging problems, we need your perspectives and expertise and experiences. Absolutely.
Yeah, actually, Jules, you make a really good point, and I think it's something that we've kind of hit on a little bit, but maybe it's worth saying explicitly, is that it's absolutely important to have Indigenous perspectives on projects that relate to Indigenous people, but Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians are part of Australia, and so every project that impacts Australia, it's good to have those perspectives there as well. Yep. So it's not just that your perspective has value when it relates to Indigenous people, it has value when it relates to anything, and it will be unique because of your circumstances, like the community in which you grew up, whether that's like in a inner city community or you've been out remote or rural, it doesn't matter. But having diverse perspectives is important for all of the work that consulting does. That's why we need more Indigenous consultants, so that we don't have our time all tied up just doing the Indigenous work, and we get to work on other things as well. Because when asked, if it's like, you can say yes or no, but if you say no, there'll be no Indigenous person working on this project in Central Australia, you're going to end up saying yes, because there needs to be a voice in the room. But if there's more of us, that choice becomes a little bit easier.
Yeah,
and it's a really good point about every project as well. Again, there's enough non-Indigenous, there's enough white people like me putting their perspectives into every problem we've got. We need diversity of perspectives on everything that we do. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe, Eamon, I'll just ask you, if you don't mind sharing, how you've been able to navigate that experience being a young Indigenous person in the workplace, like feeling extra pressure to do the extra additional work or working on projects. How have you found that time to focus on what's your own priority?
Yeah, I don't have an answer. Like, as in, I haven't got it solved yet. I haven't got it figured out. I read an article in the Conversation, and if any of you don't read the Conversation, you're sure it's like a really phenomenal resource on Indigenous staff in the public service, basically. And it kind of was reflecting back, basically what I mentioned to you then, that there just are all of these sort of extra pressures. I think you've got to get good at saying no. And saying and feeling okay to do that, feeling justified, and you should feel supported by whichever organisation you go to work for in the future to do that. Sometimes take a break. So Rodney, who's now your CEO, he worked at Nous before he joined CareerTrackers, and he kind of gave examples of, he did this project looking at native title rep bodies across Australia, was going and consulting with communities, and just got so emotionally exhausted by the end of it that he needed a break. And he kind of communicated that, but it took a little bit, I guess, of explaining for why that was more exhausting for him than it was for the non-Indigenous staff that were working on the project. So I guess I don't have an answer, except sometimes it's okay to say no. And to be honest, it's not a burden. Like, it's not something I hate doing. Like, if you asked me what my career ambitions were, I probably wouldn't reference something that is specifically Indigenous. But I know that there are probably many people in this room who would. But it's not a burden. It's something that I enjoy doing, but I also like a bit of diversity. So I just ask sometimes. I say, I've the last 3 projects I've done have been basically the same thing. I would like to do something different, and my work's pretty good about that. And I think the more Indigenous people you have, the better it gets. Yeah, right. The easier.
Thanks, Eamon. I think that's really important to share. I might just throw it out to the group to see if there are any questions that we haven't answered yet before we go on to the next topic. I think there was one from Talia on the workplace culture at Nous and why you like it.
Yeah, I can have a go at that one.
Yeah.
To start with, and then I'm sure Eamon will have something to add as well. There's a couple of things. I think number one is that it's really rare to be at a workplace that feels like a community and feels like a really small business, even though we're not. Now, as I say, we're 400 or whatever people from across the world, but Nous really does feel like a community, and everyone is quite close, share similar experiences and views on life and that kind of thing. Well, not similar experiences, certainly similar views on life, I suppose. But it really does have a community feel to it, which I think is really, really special. And the second thing is, it's really also rare to work with, vast majority, if not everyone else, being brilliant in a workplace where you sort of, you ask someone to do something and it comes back better than you could ever expected it to be done, certainly better than you could do it yourself. And that almost always happens at Nous. Like the work ethic, the commitment to quality and just the level of intelligence and thinking is just incredible. And I certainly haven't experienced that anywhere else I've worked.
Yeah, I'd sort of second that. It's like the worst bit about doing group assignments in uni is that, well, for me anyway, was that I would do a lot of work and I would do stuff that was like, I think at a reasonably good level. And then the people I would be working with just were annoying and they weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing. They weren't as sort of committed to making sure we did as good an assignment as possible. It's kind of what everyone hates about the group assignments, is the feeling of always having to carry someone. But Nous is sort of the opposite. It's like, no matter what we're doing, it's like a group assignment where everyone is an ace, and everyone is working, like willing to work really hard, and everyone will help you out if you need help. So that's kind of nice. The second thing as well, and I think it's why we have the first, perhaps, is that it's an organisation that doesn't care much for pretense or appearances. And I don't mean that like physically, I mean, to an extent, the dress code is pretty slack. But
you can see how well we are dressed, you know. At the moment,
yeah,
so.
like I'm in my trackies. I wear my slippers in the office. Like they don't care, because what they care about is what you produce. And lots of organizations say that, but Nous is the first one that I've worked at in my sort of early career so far that actually walks the talk in that area, in that regard. Like,
it's rare. It is so rare to have that in reality. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like I remember when I first started, like at induction, the MD, the owner of the company, walks in and he's wearing this like completely outrageous Hawaiian shirt and like shorts, and I think he was wearing like Birkenstocks or something.
Situation normal.
Yeah, and that's normal. And then I came back to the Canberra office, and like, yeah, people are in shorts and a t-shirt, and they want you to work your best, and they kind of trust you, which is the third point, to figure out a way to do that really well. So there's a lot of trust in the organization. There's a lot of focusing on, I think, the things that matter, and then it is a real community.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Eamon. So again, I'll just open up to see if there's any other questions from the group, because we've got about 9 minutes left. Jessica, I'm very excited to see.
Yeah. Shout out to Jessica's dog.
Yeah.
Coat, very digging the tartan.
Please, no such thing as a stupid question or anything. Please throw anything out, anything you're thinking in the chat, or turn your mics off. We're here to answer whatever you've got.
Whilst they're thinking, I might just throw it back to both of you with the idea of, and I know we've spoken about this in preparation, but that idea of networking and what is quality networking in terms of developing meaningful lifelong networks versus that sort of, superficial networking that we might picture when we say cocktail networking event, got to go and make friends with people and awkward small talk. And then also the power of networks in both of your careers and how you've been able to leverage those to your advantage.
I mean, do you want to have a crack at the first part, because you've got a really good philosophy on that, I think, and then I can answer the second part.
Yeah, okay. I don't network. Is like the first bit, I guess. And it's probably a mindset. But like my network are just my friends. My network are the people I grab a beer with on Friday night after work. And from what it looks like, the people who are more senior, that's exactly the same for them. It's just that the people they were having a beer with on a Friday night 20 years ago are now running departments. And the key there is they didn't get a beer with them those Friday nights 20 years ago because one day they'll be running a department. They did it because they liked hanging out with them and they enjoyed their company, and they found that it was a good friendship where they could both contribute to one another's lives. And I think that for me is sort of like, because the idea of going and meeting someone that I don't care about to talk about things I don't care about at a cocktail party I don't want to be at is exhausting. But the idea of going for drinks on a Friday afternoon, maybe knocking off at 4:30, going a little bit early and getting some drinks, that's fun. That's something I can sort of get around. And so I guess your networks are the people in this room, or the people that you spend time with, the people that you studied with. They're your friends. Like, your networks are just your friends. And it doesn't have to be, and I would probably encourage you not to make it this sort of formal thing where there's an agenda and someone's value to you is based on their influence. I don't think that is sort of the way to go about it. And as for the influence, I got my job at Nous because of, a network. So like I applied for Nous as a grad and got an offer here as well, and then decided that I wanted to learn some stuff about finance. So I went and did that. And then when I was deciding I might not want to be a banker, I shot an email to the principal that interviewed me and asked for a coffee. And then at the end of the coffee, he'd offered me like a job. So it's, and that's not an uncommon experience. Like, that's not an uncommon way for people to end up in a new job, particularly in the private sector, where they can be a bit more free in the way that they offer jobs. So, yeah, I don't know. And I didn't keep in touch with him because I thought he might be able to give me a job one day. I kind of kept in touch because he did interesting work and he was a nice guy, and that. So,
yeah, I think that the key to that, the key to networking is it has to be genuine. You know, so if you're networking for networking's sake, it's just you're not going to have a relationship with the person because it's not going to be genuine. So, it's hard to imagine, but as Eamon said, all the people that you go to uni with, the people that you work with, in your jobs while you're at uni or your internships or your volunteer programs, and the people that you work with in your careers, whatever jobs you might do, you stay connected with those people. Particularly now, it's so easy to stay connected with people, and then those people will go off in every sort of different direction, and you'll know where they are, and that is just your network. Like people I've worked with now, I've been working for 10 odd years, and people I've worked with are second or third in charge of departments. They're magistrates, they're QCs, they're in all sorts of places across Canberra, Brisbane, and Canada. It's just what you pick up as you go, and it has to be genuine. I think that's really important. And again, as Eamon was saying, I think there's some stat out there you can I'm sure you can find it somewhere, and it's probably 4 or 5 different versions of it, but essentially most jobs are not obtained by applying for a job on Seek and getting it. Vast majority of jobs are through people that and certainly all the jobs that I've ever got apart from one have been that way, through people that I've known, including this one at Nous. So I sat down and had, similar to Eamon, had a coffee with a principal here at Nous who was knew someone who I was working with at that time, and sat and had a conversation, and and here I am today. So that is the way it goes. So I would just encourage you all to one, meet as many people as possible and be genuine about it, and two, stay in touch with people. It doesn't have to be, having a coffee with them every Friday or a beer with them every Friday night or whatever, but just, an email here or there, or a LinkedIn connection here or there, or whatever it is. Catching up with someone if you're in their city or whatever. Stay in touch as much as you can, because you never know where people might end up.
Yeah, and so on that point, if there are students on this call now who are really thinking about Nous or management consulting as a pathway they want to explore, what's their best next step?
Send us an email.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Reach out on LinkedIn or email or absolutely, I think, I'm sure, Eamon, I'm sure you're the same. Whenever I go to an event at a uni or one of these career trackers events or whatever, I'm more than happy for people to reach out. I've been in your situation. I was at uni. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I wanted to have conversations with people to see what it was, what their job was like, and to get some advice or whatever. So, never be afraid to reach out to people. If you reach out to Eamon and I, we'll probably email back at least once. But other people, there's nothing to lose by emailing people. Like, the worst thing that can happen is they don't respond. But particularly, for Eamon and I, just reach out. Absolutely, wouldn't hesitate.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would say be careful about who you reach out to, because some people are less likely to respond, and that's a pragmatic thing. Like, if you reached out to the company's managing director, I don't know that you would get a response. You might actually, you still might, but I think Julian or I are probably more likely to respond. I've had people reach out to me that I don't know, that literally just found me on LinkedIn and were like, I'm interested in Nous. And I was happy to chat to him. I kind of admire the hustle. That's that's great. You want to, it's so yeah, reach out basically.
Yeah, brilliant. And so before, I'm going to do one last round call out for questions. So whilst you guys are thinking about that, I'm also just going to share a link to an evaluation form in the chat as well. Obviously, this is the first time we've done program day like this, thanks to COVID, but also gives us an opportunity to try something different. It's less walkie-talkies and scenario-based workshops, and it's more really thinking about what the career paths are that you're interested in, and get that idea of that insider insight. And so if you've enjoyed this session, if you've enjoyed this style of program day more, we really want to hear that feedback from you, or thinking about what else might be useful into the future. So definitely please fill out that evaluation link. I'm also going to pop my own email in the chat, and if you've got any follow-up questions or any questions about CT in general, please always feel free to reach out to me directly. And as Julian and Eamon have said, they are both on LinkedIn, and I think you can probably find them there if you want to connect. That they offered, so I don't feel like I'm throwing.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. I think for me. And sorry, Hannah, there was one other thing that I thought you were asking, like what to do next if you want to get into management consulting.
Yeah.
I think one of the unfortunate realities of the industry is that they really want, like, I guess Julian kind of said, everyone he works with is quite impressive. And so I think start thinking about all the ways in which you are impressive, because I have no doubt that everyone on this call is impressive. The easy way is to say, oh, I got really good grades at university. And sure, people understand that that's impressive, but that's not the only way. So if you are working at university and, you know, looking after kids or babysitting your baby brother or doing all these other kinds of things, start thinking about that, and don't assume that because you don't have the best grades or you didn't get the best ATAR that you aren't impressive. I think far from it. Like, I know for myself, I got a trash ATAR and my grades at uni were pretty good, but they were nothing spectacular. So I think, yeah, that's it is thinking about the things that make you different and the story that you have to tell, and that will be impressive. And so if you can communicate that well, I think that will help you if it's something you're interested in.
I couldn't agree more. And, you know, just to add to, you know, my uni scores were pretty ordinary, you know, pretty close to average. So don't be too worried about that kind of thing. But I think the key to what Eamon said is think about what makes you different. And it's sort of, it sounds really naff and but one of the best pieces of advice I got early in my career was think about what your brand is, like what your personal brand is. Try not to think too much about that phrasing because it's terrible. But the idea being that sort of how you are different and what value you bring is really important. And, you know, the idea of good uni marks, that's actually not, you know, what's going to make you different. A lot of people have good uni marks. So exactly what Eamon said, think about the other things that you've done in your experience or the way you think about things that make you different and set you out apart from others. I think that's really good advice.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you, Julian and Eamon. I think that's been a really interesting discussion and really appreciate you both taking the time to be a part of this. Thanks everyone for participating and for asking some really great questions. I think it's been a really brilliant discussion. My favorite thing to do at the end of these Zoom calls, as corny as it might be, is for everyone to take themselves off mute and give a big round of applause to our presenters who have volunteered their times. Go on. You can be corny with me. Don't make me be the only one to do this. We always really appreciate our corporate partners and the volunteering that they do. And I know that Julian and Eamon took some time to both prepare for this, but also to offer those really frank and insightful insights. And I know that hopefully that will help you guys out as you start to think about what's next for you. So have a great afternoon, everyone. Please fill out that evaluation form, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you all soon, hopefully in person, if they ever let us out of the house in Melbourne, right?
Good luck with that. Thanks everyone for listening and your attention. And again, thanks for the opportunity. It's a real privilege to be able to participate in these things. So good luck, everyone. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.
Night.